In this episode, we ask the question, is it actually better to live a long life or not? We then look at how death is ironically the apex of our faith. Lastly, we try to define what happiness actually is and what role working and struggling play in that. Enjoy! You're listening to Campfire Theology, where we explore topics you usually wouldn't discuss in church. So gather around with us because we believe the conversation itself is holy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, thinking about the book of Job, which is so pertinent to our topic, but at the beginning of the book of Job, there's this discussion between God and Satan, and Satan is essentially asking God if he could go and torment Job.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, will you allow me to do this to him or whatever? Yeah. It's almost like a wager.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I think...
Isn't that interesting? That in itself, when I read that, it's like, that's how I felt too, is, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's like...
No, you're fine.
That's such a... I don't know what the word is, but it almost felt like God was gambling with us, kind of like, yeah, go ahead and I'll let you tempt this guy, or like you said, just a wager, like almost like two rich guys over these people, just kind of like it felt dirty to me, almost like, man, really, like this is your most.
So the butterfly effect of that is like, okay, why, if Job is such a good and faithful servant, why would God allow that evil to him? And that's kind of the question that you asked earlier, Kyle, is like, why do bad things happen to good people? And here we are, how many thousands of years later, talking about Job. How many millions of people have found inspiration through the story of Job to like persevere through hard times and to trust God above all and through it all, right? Like, lost a child, but Job lost all of his children. Like, I see a biblical precedent for this, right? And like, I know that Job got through it and that he was faithful to God to the end. And so it's like, in some ways, it's almost like a sacrifice, right? And the same thing like with this war in Ukraine. Okay, 1 million people have died, and it's like, what good could possibly come of this? Like, how could a good God allow this? And it's like, well, maybe God is, maybe we don't know this, but there was also 10 million people who started to like question their own mortality through the war on Ukraine, and through that, 7 or 8 million people got saved, and they decided, I'm going to follow Christ through, and the war. The war in Ukraine was what sparked them to say, hey, I'm going to die. Something crazy could happen. Putin could come to my country, and like, evil exists in the world. We're seeing it firsthand in Ukraine. There's got to be good God out there, and how many people have like turned to God because of that? And that's where I feel like I just trust that good is happening in the background, and God has makes all things work together for our good.
Right.
But I also feel bad for like the 1 million people who were killed in Ukraine. Like, that's 1 million souls gone, and they were almost like sacrificed in some way.
So let me push on that. So my biggest anxiety and worry in life is something happening to my children.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only things I get anxious about. And my wife, my family. So I think Satan uses that, and he has used that against me. And I always struggle with this because it's like, okay, so what is the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen in my earthly view is that I could lose one of my children.
Right.
They could die, or my wife could die. And yet, at the same time, that's the basis of our faith. I've always had this struggle back and forth where it's like, literally the basis of our faith is death. That knowing that when the worst thing in our minds happens, it's actually the greatest thing for them,
right,
to ever happen. So my grandpa passed away recently, and it's like, he's not in pain anymore. He doesn't have his cancer anymore. He's in heaven with God. So the greatest thing that has ever happened to him is the death for him. Is the greatest thing that will ever happen to us. So is there precedence for Satan keeping us alive? Satan, essentially, if you're a Christian, Satan needs you to stay alive.
Yeah, right.
And continue to work on you. as opposed to killing you. Because if he kills you at that time, then it's over. He's already lost you, right? We would be in heaven.
But
So
I don't know that he can physically kill.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
He can torment your soul, and he could make you feel depressed and make you feel suicidal, right?
That's my point. Is that he
Make
keep
others
you.
feel you.
Yeah, or make somebody else, right?
Like, like manipulate their emotions. I think we talked about that with Screw Tape Letters when we had our book discussion on that, which is Lewis says in that book that it's sort of like, the reward for this young guy who came to Christ in the book was to die, basically, like at the point where he still
Right.
believed. And so a little of our discussion from that was like, exactly what you're saying, Kyle, is if we go on for decades and decades and decades, that's decades of doubt that we could have.
Yeah.
Right? That's decades of sort of like, and we've all seen it with friends that we've had. Their faith has soured, and they haven't. I mean, and I think it ultimately is on them that they haven't pursued a relationship with God. I don't think God is actively out there souring people's faith or anything like that. But I do think that all of that time that we have could really work against us if we really let it work against us.
Right.
Yeah.
If we really let the enemy work it against us.
Right. So it's like a weird catch-22 where it's like I pray to have a long life. I pray for longevity.
Right.
But why is that? Why do I want longevity? Because I have this fear, because death is scary to me, and at the
Right.
same time, it's also the absolute apex of my faith in Christianity.
I think we have that feeling because we're creatures of God. We are designed to live for eternity. So
Good point.
death feels awkward to us because it is. That's not what we were created. We were created to live. So we have this desire to always want to live. And I've heard that before, and it makes sense.
I bet.
We have that.
It was probably
It probably was Rick Warren.
Maybe Dave Ramsey. It's a Dave Ramsey quote, I think.
See, we could probably just get Rick Warren.
next week. Rick Warren.
But to all those same
I
points,
guess escalated quickly.
We always a Rick Warren cover band here.
hey, I didn't highlight it. You guys did.
Right, exactly. I just said
I just used the reference.
Do you have a statistic for us?
But statistically, so I'm thinking about all this when you guys are seeing all this. Where why did bad things happen to good people, and what about this? What suffering in their lives, and a million people die, and all this. Again, it gets back to your point earlier, which you kept hitting on over and over, which is so true. Is that it sounds like such a selfish, just I can't remember the word you used. Entitled culture, and it really is in the sense that we're looking at everything from our perspective. Because if we've talked about this in the past about, what does it truly mean to be infinite and eternal and like live forever, and just what does that really mean for God's timing of and C.S. Lewis talked about that where, if maybe it's like an author writing something and he can come back to it at any point in time, and that it's, time is irrelevant to God.
Sure.
So let's just say hypothetically we lived 100 years and we all suffered for 100 years, which, of course there's good times, but let's just say you lived a horrible life, you suffered, whatever, you're a good person, but all bad things happened to you for an entire 100 years.
Yeah,
Even if that did, and
like the Israelites under Egyptian rule,
right?
You're born into slavery for
400 years.
For 400 years, so basically 10 generations or whatever it is.
Sure.
All you ever do is work and get whipped.
But even in your entire life, let's just say you suffered for your entire life of 100 years, whatever it is,
Right.
and then you die, and then you go to heaven, and it's eternal. When you look back on it, like they say, is our 100 years on Earth. If you look at the entire spectrum, it's like the snap of a finger. It's nothing. We're like, oh, why did that? Like, we're sitting there from our perspective, getting mad and upset and thinking it should be our way, when God might be like, guys, I know you suffered, I know you whatever, but you do realize that was a blip in the scope of time.
Exactly,
and
right.
Now you have nothing but eternity to rejoice of me, and you get rewards for suffering and being persecuted for my benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when we look at it from his perspective, then it's kind of like, oh man, we're kind of a bunch of whiners. Right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
right. Yeah,
right? Doesn't it feel that way? It's like
100% to me. Yeah.
I'm sitting there like, oh man, I had a rough month or so. Like, Really, David?
Yeah.
Shut up.
I feel like we just lose.
We've all been saying.
We did that. It's
I thought you just shut up for
We've been texting that on the side. No, I think you're exactly right. We lose perspective really easily, and I think that's
Is that
I
Satan?
think that Satan
Right.
can manipulate our emotions to really feel like a victim,
Yes.
Yeah.
and that's a very pervasive problem in the culture, specifically and in our country, and I think just in humanity.
I think in the world, the whole world.
It's not just a America problem, but it is. You see it here all the time, right? It's like, I just have it so hard. My boss is so mean to me. It's like, dude,
Yes.
you have it so good. Just shut up. Look at how good your life is compared to how bad it could be.
Yeah, that's the,
People just lack that perspective.
that's the count your bussing idea that you hear preached is that, like, step back and think about what's going good for you. And it's kind of it's a lot easier to think about the negative stuff because it's almost like it just sort of is glaring at you. You know what I mean? Like, everything would be great in my life if I didn't have this thing that was always bringing me down.
Yeah, when I say easy, it's a lot of times like easier to talk about bad things.
Yeah.
It's easier sometimes to complain of like, hey, oh, what's the problem that you're having? Let's go deep into that and let's try and solve it or something, as opposed to like, hey, I had a great day with my kids. They ran around and laughed, and we're all healthy and happy. Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
Like,
it's almost
oh yeah, cool. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, but think how
Good conversation.
right.
Yeah, well, it's a cultural thing. It feels like to me it's kind of a cultural thing.
Like what?
Like we're raised, and society just naturally gravitates towards talking about the negative. And when you talk about the positive, you're viewed as like, oh, he's bragging about his good kids again. Oh, I'm so glad your husband has a good job.
So do you think
it's sort of like, it's almost kind of like viewed upon as bragging.
Right.
Yeah.
Like then people become jealous almost in a way.
Yeah, or just like people love the struggle. Like people love to find like like camaraderie in the struggle.
Sure.
And it's harder to find a group of people who want to find camaraderie in like the joy and the thankfulness and the gratitude.
Do you think God finds beauty in the struggle? Because to me, there's like, the Bible is so based off of struggles, trials, tribulations, and that is real throughout the entire Bible. Like this back and forth battle of is struggling to find your way, struggling to find God, and then even when you find God, struggling to maintain.
Yeah. I think God creates like the beauty in the struggle. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of one of the good things that you were talking about earlier, David, about the good consequences of something tough that happens. Did God want that to be for humanity? I don't think so. I think he wanted us to come to him and not choose, the fruit, or not choose the evil thing that we do all the time. But he really creates something in us when we struggle. Like there's the character building piece of it, that when you get to be, it's funny because when you get to be an adult, you have so much perspective about that. Like, and you can look back and see like how those little things that you did early in your life really did make an impact on. I remember when I was younger, we would always wake up on the weekends and do our paper out. And I hated it. Like 6:30 in the morning, my dad would get me up, and it totally was not his responsibility at all. It was really ours as three brothers. Like, we should have set an alarm. We should have got up and got the papers ready. We should have done what we needed to do. We could have walked to do it, but he gave us a ride. And I still hated that at that time. Like, oh man, he's waking me up and I got to do all this, and da da da. But I didn't hate the money that I got from it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hate that, I was able to almost like brag about like how much work I was doing, and that prideful piece to it as well. But God really did a lot more in me because of those good habits. And even now, he's doing a good work in me because he's helping me to remember my dad in such a, a beautiful way. Yeah, that he actually cared. And that just shows how much of a loving dad he was to me, that he cared so much to do all of this and my mom too, and would, almost every day as well would help. So like there's all those things that we see that we struggle with that really make a big impact on us when we get older.
Right. I think our culture a lot of times views the struggle differently. They don't want to struggle.
Correct.
They want it to be easy because easy is easier, and it connotates the happy feeling. And the more we can hold on to the happy feeling, the less we struggle, the more happiness we will feel, and therefore that's what I want to feel. So
you should do what makes you happy.
Right.
That's the ultimate idea. Yeah.
Right.
It'd be all the time.
In society.
Right. No, I mean, like that's that's the sentiment.
Right. So even as parents, I've struggled with the struggle for my kids, where living in America and living in we're middle class, but we're well off enough where there's far less struggles comparatively to around the world, and yet there's times that I think it's far more of a detriment to my children that they know that everything is already provided for them. I almost sometimes try to manufacture struggle. It's kind of like like
manufacture the hardship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can learn something.
It's perfect parallels to what you're talking about. Like when you have children, it's a perfect symmetry between how we parent our children to how God parents us. Like our children don't learn when everything's easy.
Correct.
Right. They don't appreciate things when everything's easy.
Correct.
You have to go through that struggle to appreciate it, to learn those, valuable skills, and to like kind of develop your character.
Well, you know what's funny? It seems like most things in the world we accept. The general population accepts. If you want to be in shape, you got to work out. You got to go to the gym. You got to eat healthy. You got to, if you want to. I didn't hear it.
It goes epic.
Yeah.
What he said.
If you want to succeed financially, you got to, build a business. Follow good hard. If you want to be good in school, you got to put in the hours, do the homework, whatever. Like whatever it is, like pretty much we accept all of that as society. But when it comes to emotional things or like our faith or things that we all just think like everything should be easy. Nobody wants to work for that. Be like, oh, I got to get up every day and read my Bible and work on
exactly.
Or like being happy. I got to everybody wants a quick fix. But they don't think that, they all know, like, okay, if I want to be in shape, I got to work out. And that's accepted and that's okay.
Yeah.
Why is it that everything else, we know you got to work for it and it's going to be hard, but the reward is great. But when it comes to emotions or God or anything else, everybody thinks it should be just like an instant.
Right. Is it like this perversion of we teach our kids from a young age, you work hard in school, that way then you can get a good job.
Yeah.
When you get a good job, you'll get more money that will then allow you to get toys and different things that will then provide these periods of happiness. And if you can afford jet skis, being able to go jet ski on a lake is going to give you a higher happiness, a higher dopamine hit. Therefore, you will be happier in life because you're able to reach this higher height of happiness. And ultimately, your goal then is if you can make enough money, then you can retire. And within that retirement, at the end of your life, will be your ultimate happiness because your struggle is done. You put in the hard work, and now you can rest on your laurels and rest on your accomplishments and just bask in all the happiness and glory. So therefore, the end of your life, the retirement is going to be
ultimate happiness.
I feel like that's kind of a cultural thing. That
agree.
Like maybe it might be uniquely, Western culture.
That's what I was going to say. I think it is.
Like, I feel like the real wise people in the world recognize early that, like, you're not going to be eternally happy in retirement because you have money. Like, go do something that you enjoy throughout life. Like, because you have 70 years or whatever on Earth. Like, don't wait for the last 10 to quote unquote be happy once you're in retirement and save enough money and worked all. Just go do something that you really enjoy and make your, the process and the struggle and the day to day, make that your joy and find joy in that. And I think
joy
so many people
That's good.
can't find joy because I think that they're looking for something, or they're looking for the world to provide them something that only God can.
Right.
And so that they kind of go from job to job. Like, I have this great job and now I make this much more money. Like, everyone here around the table started at a certain salary and has probably added several dozen percentages to it, double, tripled their salary since they first started working. You don't feel like you don't feel like double and triples happy. Why is that? It's because money doesn't buy you happiness. Like, and everyone says that, and you're like, well, sure, okay, but give me $1 million bucks.
We all know
I'll be
it,
happy.
but we're like, yeah, but I'm going to try this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not true, but
Yeah, you don't need shoes to run a mile, but it sure helps. Kind of the idea. But I don't know. I just feel like it's a great joy. I think it says that in Ecclesiastes too. Like, it's a gift from God to enjoy your occupation.
Absolutely.
And I'm paraphrasing that a little bit,
Yeah,
but that is in Ecclesiastes. Like, it's a great joy for man to find something that he enjoys and enjoy the toil of his labor.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, I totally agree. And it's finding the joy in what you're doing is so important. Like, if we're looking for joy, and joy is sort of like an attitude that we have, then like, why can't we just change our attitude? Wasn't it Charles Spurgeon who said that life is like 99% of like 1% of what happens to you and 99% of how you feel about it. Yeah. So that was a David paraphrase, but so right, statistically he may have said that 99% of the time. But no, so the idea is like, if you really hate your job or whatever, like,
go get a new job.
Yeah.
That's what society tells you.
Yeah. Or is there a way that you could find a way to love it? You know what I mean? Or, I mean, I get that there is like probably limits to that,
For sure.
the perfect example is,
but can you find some joy?
Perfect example is people, you get burnout, you get whatever. They're like, I just need to go on a vacation.
Sure.
And they're like, it doesn't matter if you go to, I'm going to get rid of everything. I'm going to go move to Tahiti and live on a beach somewhere. Okay, fine. The problem with doing that is you're taking yourself to Tahiti. You're the problem. Like, you're going to have the same issues,
Exactly.
Until you fix the root cause. And everybody, we want to do, a Band-Aid to fix everything instead of really. It's funny how much we really just run from God. All of us in this room, at least feel like the guiltiest one of it, where I know, we sit here and talk about this. We all know the answers. Are we really doing them? I know for me, I'm not. Because so many times I'm like, I'm unhappy with this, or I'm not. It's like, I know I need to get up every morning and read my Bible and spend time alone with God. And that's been on my heart a lot lately. And every morning my alarm goes off, and like, I'm with the kids at night, and I'm tired. I'm just like, I'll just sleep in today. I'll pick it up and read it later. I'll do this. And it's like, I keep putting everything off, and then every day, and then I listen to my sermons during the day or whatever. And it's like, oh, make sure you get in that alone time. Make sure you do this. It's like, I know the answers, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. I think we all have knowledge. We have the knowledge to do it.
So Dave Ramsey talks about like budgeting, financial planning, whatever. He's like, it's 80%. It's 20% knowledge. It's 80% discipline and self-control.
Right.
Like, it's not real rocket science. You want to save money, you have to spend less than you make.
Right. Yeah. But the discipline,
and that's really easy. Like, okay, you got it, but now you have to go have the discipline to do it.
Yeah.
And
simple but not easy.
Simple but not easy.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good way.
Yeah, God calls us to be still and know that I'm God. He's there. The stillness and just being with Him is his desire, right? He's not calling us to always go and go and go. And it's why, I mean, you can talk about a Sabbath, right? Like, He wants us to rest with Him and be with Him.
Focused. I have really been struggling with that lately. I'm glad you said that, because that really hit me right now. It's very insightful, Kyle. I'm surprised that came from you.
Can't believe you have a job. You sure so insightful.
Literally, though, like that's been on my heart lately. Is God wants me to be still, and I've mentioned this, I think, to my wife, where I feel guilty because I feel like I'm being productive, and it's like, oh, when I got some downtime, I can do stuff. So like I'm sitting there, in the rocking chair feeding my daughter a bottle, but I'm sitting there on my phone doing emails, or I'm texting, or I'm doing this but I'm like, oh, but I'm spending time with my daughter. No, I'm not. I could sit there for physically, I'm always there.
Yeah. Right.
Even today, I was playing with my daughter, and it's like, and she was looking at me. We're in the basement. She's playing with her little sand thing she's got for Christmas, and I'm almost like trying to hold, like I'm sitting at her kid table with her, and I'm almost trying to hold my phone to the bottom of the table while I'm like, she's not even looking, right? She's playing with her sand,
Right.
and I'm like hunched over, and I was looking at my phone, and she comes over. She's like, "What's wrong, Daddy?" I'm like, "Oh, my back hurts." And she comes over, and she like sets my back up in the chair and like pats. She's like, "Is that better, Daddy? You feel good now?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's so.
She notices like I'm not full, even though she's busy. She wants my attention, and it's like,
yeah,
man, why? What is so important? And literally, I was texting you guys about this thing.
Oh my
God. It's like I can wait an hour to read their text. There's nothing that I have to do this second. And it's like, I need to be just 100% focused on my daughter.
Well, now that you're a podcast star, though, the sanctification of millions.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. But I mean, for real.
Set your daughter aside and be a good man.
And a lot of people talked about it, and I don't know how you guys feel on it, but so many people are like, COVID was God's way of saying, hey, slow down, world.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like there's some truth in that.
Yeah, I agree.
And it almost like, hey, it's 2023. Are we back to where we were, where we're just, okay, we're back about our things. We're busy again. Or it's like,
yeah, I know.
I think we are.
We're busier.
Yeah.
Just as busy or busier.
Yeah. I think the hard part about, like what you were saying, is kind of the same thing that Will was saying earlier is the sacrifices that need to be made so that we could slow down, Like if you were to say to a family that lost a family member due to COVID, to say, well, COVID was the way that God told us to slow down. They say, well, COVID killed my dad because of X, Y, and Z, your granddad. So I think
we'll put a disclaimer. Put a link to that video.
Look at YouTube, granddad. Link
it seems like a hard thing, but like I don't know how you get around it. Like, so many people are just dying every day. You know what I mean? There's so many people that are struggling, and like you were saying earlier, David, God uses all those things for good. So it's hard though, I think, for us to put our head around it and just see, like what Will was saying earlier, we expect to know the answers, and especially to have an easy answer to why God is allowing this. Why did God allow COVID to happen? One of the good points to it was, like you said, helping us to slow down.
I think there's a blend that we have to have of we can't just sit. Just be right. So working is godly, and finding purpose in life is extremely important. And I think that's what so many people constantly search for. I always think of it as God designed us purposely. Like we weren't an accident. And if you believe Darwinian evolution, your worldview is going to be the polar opposite.
Right.
Your worldview is going to be, I was an accident.
Yep.
What can I do? So I believe Satan uses that to totally scramble and distort your entire worldview. So the foundation of what you are as a person is completely different than as if you were a Christian. So to come to find out, hey, God created you. God created you purposely. Therefore, you have a purpose here, and finding what that purpose is will bring you ultimate joy and happiness.